Next up is entitled Net Zero Housing for the Rest of Us. Kristopher Steege Reimann has developed rural electrification and efficient lighting initiatives throughout Chile, consulted with homeowners about energy efficiency improvements in Madison, started an LED lighting business, and remodeled 2 homes to be more beautiful and energy efficient. He lives in Madison's Darbo-Worthington neighborhood with his wife, a naughty Sheba, chickens, and honeybees. Please welcome Kristopher.
Okay. So, what is net zero housing? It's pretty simple. It's a house that produces more energy than it consumes. And today what I want to do is challenge the idea that net zero housing has to be expensive. It doesn't. My wife and I started the project with a combined income of about $50,000 a year. The problem was all the net zero housing projects we were reading about were like really expensive, like $100,000 minimum. And what we wanted to do was show that net zero housing wasn't just for rich people. It was something that even folks like us make with like our entry-level jobs could do, and we thought we could do it for less than $30,000 a year. So, I want to start out by saying that net zero housing is more than a bunch of solar panels and insulation. That's really important, but doing it inexpensively is much more about living a net zero lifestyle. For example, finding a house. It's super important to get a small house. It doesn't have to be a tiny home, but think about the energy a 565 square house uses compared to your typical 2,600 square foot house. Another part of living net zero is conserving energy. We timed showers, sorry Julia, dried our laundry outside, installed LED lights, and one of the more important things we actually did was getting a smaller refrigerator. Who knew? We didn't need such a large refrigerator for just the 2 of us. And what's interesting is from conservation alone, we were able to use 75% less electricity than your typical house. And the very best part of this is that that cost us nothing. Like, that's pretty cool. But technology and engineering is still my passion and the things I'm most excited about. So these next things are the things I'm probably get too excited about. So the solar electric system. Everyone's like, oh, you don't make a lot of money, you can't afford that. Well, it only actually costs $8,000 after the state and federal tax credits covered almost 50% of it. And to tie in with that, financing's super important. The amount that we were paying on our loan for the solar system actually was about the same amount that MG&E was paying us for that power it was producing. So that was an easy decision. Now the ventilation, this was also really important. When you get a house super tight, that makes a huge difference to have fresh air. And by getting good ventilation, get good ventilation. Finally, insulation and air sealing. We used tons of spray foam, tons of cellulose, and actually the biggest insulation project that was the most important was insulating our foundation and basement. And then water heating. Water heating was something that we looked at doing solar hot water. The actual cheapest and most efficient thing to do we found was actually getting a heat pump water heater, and that only costs about $500. Now, this next picture is a picture of a heat pump that we should have used. Unfortunately, this heat pump wasn't produced and made available in the US until 2 years after our project, and we ended up using a crazy experimental system that failed in the 2nd year. So what was the outcome of this? We ended up using a fraction amount of the energy that a typical house used. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is that all of our decisions weren't just based on payback alone. Comfort was a really big thing. Like the pictures of these shades here, they had about a 20-year payback. That didn't make a lot of sense financially, but it was awesome finally being able to sleep without streetlights shining in. Some of the other benefits, we had a warm floor under our feet. That was like pretty cool. Having fresh air in the house, that was something that was cool, not coming into our bedroom and having it stink Um, Finally, there's a lot of technologies that can get really overwhelming. Geothermal heat pumps, solar hot water, backyard wind turbines, they sound sexy, but a lot of those things just don't make a lot of sense, and there's cheaper ways to do things. So if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this, is that by living in a not-so-big house, conserving energy, and installing a bunch of solar panels and a little bit of insulation, you can get to net zero pretty quickly and affordably. You don't need to be rich to have a net zero home. Thank you.